January 28, 2016. The air inside the Waterloo, Ontario boardroom smelled like failure. Not the clean kind. The suffocating, rotten kind that seeps into leather chairs and stays there for decades. John Choon, the newly appointed CEO of BlackBerry, stared at a single spreadsheet on his laptop. The numbers weren't just bad. They were existential. Market share, 0.01%. Valuation, $4.3 billion. A decade earlier, this company was worth over $70 billion. He clicked refresh. Nothing changed. The phone that once controlled half the smartphone world now controlled nothing. The device that presidents, CEOs, and drug dealers swore by was now a punchline. And the worst part, everyone saw it coming. Everyone except the people who built it. This is not a story about innovation failing. This is a story about arrogance so extreme, so delusional, that it killed a king. This is the story of how BlackBerry looked at the future, lagged at it, and chose to die. Let's rewind to 1998. The world was drowning in wires. If you wanted to check your email, you needed to sit at a desk, plug into a modem, and pray your dial-up connection didn't drop. Mobile phones existed, but they were dumb. They made calls. That's Italiano. Then Mike Lazaridis, a Canadian engineer with a vision bordering on obsession, launched the BlackBerry pager. It was ugly. It was clunky. It was revolutionary. For the first time in human history, you could receive emails in your pocket. Anywhere. Anytime. Wall Street lost its mind. Suddenly, traders could execute deals from taxis. Lawyers could bill hours from golf courses. The BlackBerry wasn't a phone. It was a productivity weapon, and the addictive click-click of that physical keyboard became the sound of power. By 2009, BlackBerry owned nearly 50% of the North American smartphone market. 50%. They weren't just winning, they were the entire game. Fortune 500 companies issued BlackBerries to every executive. The U.S. government made it the official device for secure communication. Barack Obama famously fought the Secret Service to keep his BlackBerry after becoming president in 2009. Research in Motion, BlackBerry's parent company, was valued at over $70 billion at its peak in 2008. Co-CEOs Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie were treated like gods. Canada celebrated them as national heroes. They appeared on magazine covers. They gave TED Talks. They were untouchable. And then, on January 9th, 2007, a man in a black turtleneck walked onto a stage in San Francisco and said 5 words that would kill BlackBerry. Today, Apple's going to reinvent the phone. Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone. No physical keyboard, just a smooth glass screen. It didn't look like a business tool. It looked like a toy. A beautiful, impractical, consumer-focused toy. And BlackBerry's leadership laughed. Jim Balsillie, BlackBerry's co-CEO, was asked about the iPhone in an interview with Reuters in February 2007. His response was pure arrogance. It's kind of one more entran into an already very busy space with lots of choice for consumers. But in terms of a sort of a sea change for BlackBerry, I would think that's overstating it. Overstating it. The iPhone was overstated. Mike Lazaridis went further. In private meetings, he reportedly called the iPhone's touchscreen gimmicky and insisted that serious professionals would never give up the BlackBerry's physical keyboard. Why would they? The keyboard was perfect. It was fast. It was tactile. It was the reason BlackBerry dominated. But here's the thing about perfection. It becomes a religion. And religions don't adapt. They defend. BlackBerry's engineers had spent a decade perfecting that keyboard. It was their identity, their pride, their entire design philosophy. The idea of abandoning it felt like betrayal, so they didn't. In 2008, BlackBerry released the bold 9000. Physical keyboard, same old interface. Business-focused, safe. It sold well, because the corporate world still loved BlackBerry. IT departments loved the security. CFOs loved the bulk discounts. Executives loved the status symbol. But something else was happening. Something BlackBerry's leadership refused to acknowledge. Consumers were falling in love with the iPhone. Not because it was better for email, it wasn't. But because it was better for everything else. The iPhone had a real web browser. It had a touchscreen that felt like magic. And in July 2008, Apple launched the App Store. Suddenly, your phone wasn't just a communication device. It was a gaming console, a GPS, a music studio, a library, a social network. BlackBerry's response, the BlackBerry Storm, released in November 2008. It was RIM's first touchscreen phone, and it was a disaster. The screen physically clicked when you pressed it, simulating the feel of a button. It was slow, buggy, painful to use. Critics destroyed it. Users returned it in droves. Verizon, the exclusive carrier, was furious. But BlackBerry didn't pivot. They doubled down. Our customers want keyboards, they insisted. The enterprise market is loyal. They were right, for about 2 more years. 2010. The cracks were showing. Apple released the iPhone 4. Google's Android operating system was exploding. Samsung, HTC, and Motorola were flooding the market with sleek, powerful touchscreen devices. And slowly, painfully, the corporate world started to crack. Employees didn't want BlackBerries anymore. They wanted iPhones. They wanted Android. IT departments resisted, but the pressure was relentless. A new term emerged, BYOD. Bring your own device. Employees would buy their own iPhones and demand corporate email access. Companies caved. BlackBerry's market share started to slide. 50% in 2009, 37% in 2010, 20% in 2011. The fall was accelerating. And still, RIM's leadership clung to the past. In 2011, they released the BlackBerry Playbook, a tablet designed to compete with the iPad. It launched without native email support, a BlackBerry product. Without email, the irony was brutal. But the real death blow came from within. RIM's operating system, BlackBerry OS, was ancient. It was built for email and calendars, not apps and multimedia. Developers hated it. Building apps for BlackBerry was painful and unprofitable. The App Store had 500,000 apps. Google Play had 400,000. BlackBerry World had 70,000. And most of them were garbage. RIM knew they needed to rebuild. In 2011, they announced BlackBerry 10, a completely new operating system. It would be modern, touch-friendly, app-rich. It would save the company, but it wouldn't launch until early 2013. 2 years away. 2 years is an eternity in tech, and the market wasn't waiting. By 2012, BlackBerry's market share had collapsed to 6%. The stock price, which hit $147 per share in 2008, was trading at $8. Layoffs began. Offices closed. The press smelled blood. Tech blogs started writing BlackBerry's obituary. And through it all, Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie kept insisting they could turn it around. BlackBerry 10 would be the comeback. The market would see. Loyal customers would return. On January 23, 2012, both co-CEOs resigned. The board replaced them with Torsten Heinz, a company insider. His mission: launch BlackBerry 10 and save the company. He had one shot. Pause for a second. Imagine being Torsten Heinz. You inherit a company that once ruled the world and is now bleeding to death. Your competitors have a 5-year head start. Your app ecosystem is a ghost town. Your brand is toxic to anyone under 30, and your only hope is a new operating system that's still in development. Would you have taken that job? Would you have believed you could win? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know if you'd have walked into that fire. January 30th, 2013. BlackBerry 10 launched. The event was massive. Global. Simultaneous press conferences in New York, Toronto, Paris, London, Dubai, and Johannesburg. BlackBerry spent millions on marketing. The new OS was genuinely impressive. Smooth, modern, gesture-based. The BlackBerry Z10, the flagship touchscreen device, looked sleek. The Q10, with a physical keyboard, appealed to loyalists. Initial reviews were cautiously optimistic. The Verge gave it 8 out of 10. Engadget called it a worthy competitor. For about 3 weeks, there was hope. Maybe BlackBerry could survive. And then reality hit. The app gap was insurmountable. Instagram wasn't on BlackBerry 10. Snapchat wasn't there. Netflix, Spotify, major banks, most refused to develop for the platform. BlackBerry's market share was too small. Developers couldn't justify the cost. Consumers didn't care how good the OS was if their favorite apps didn't exist. Sales were disappointing. Thorsten Heinz tried to spin the numbers, but the math was merciless. In Q2 2013, BlackBerry shipped 6.8 million devices. Apple shipped 37.4 million iPhones. Samsung shipped 71 million smartphones. By September 2013, BlackBerry announced a staggering $965 million loss and plans to lay off 4,500 employees, 40% of the workforce. Thorsten Heinz was fired. The board scrambled. Buyout talks began. Private equity firms circled like vultures. In November 2013, BlackBerry announced it would no longer sell itself. Instead, they'd bring in a turnaround specialist. His name was John Chun, a software veteran, a corporate surgeon. He'd save Sibbies. Maybe he could save BlackBerry. Chun's strategy was brutal, but necessary. Stop competing in consumer phones. Focus on enterprise software and security. License the BlackBerry name to other manufacturers. Cut costs. Survive. The last BlackBerry-designed phone, the BlackBerry Priv, launched in 2015. It ran Android. The irony was painful. The company that mocked touchscreens and refused to adapt was now licensing its competitor's operating system. By January 2016, BlackBerry's market share was statistically 0.01%. The company that once held 50% of North America now held nothing. The brand was licensed to TCL Communication, a Chinese manufacturer. They released several Android-powered BlackBerry devices, the last being the key delay in 2018. Sold poorly. TCL ended the licensing agreement in August 2020, officially killing BlackBerry hardware production. In 2021, an American startup called Onward Mobility announced ambitious plans to revive BlackBerry with a 5G keyboard phone. Tech enthusiasts were cautiously excited, but by February 2022, Onward Mobility collapsed. BlackBerry's leadership saw the iPhone and made a fatal assumption. Business users would never choose a consumer toy over a professional tool. They were wrong. Not because the iPhone was more professional, but because the line between work and life was erasing. People didn't want two devices. They wanted one device that did everything. And when BlackBerry finally tried to adapt, it was too late. The app gap was insurmountable. The brand was damaged. Consumer trust was gone. Momentum in tech is everything. Lose it, and you're finished. There's a deeper lesson here. BlackBerry didn't fail because they refused to quit. They failed because they refused to evolve. Those are not the same thing. Perseverance without adaptation is just stubbornness. And stubbornness, in business, is suicide. The companies that survive existential threats aren't the ones that fight harder for the past. They're the ones that abandon the past completely. Microsoft did it. IBM did it. Apple did it when Steve Jobs returned in 1997 and killed the products that were bleeding the company dry. BlackBerry had that chance in 2008. They could have killed the keyboard, built a touchscreen OS from scratch, embraced the app ecosystem. They had the cash, the talent, the brand, power, but they didn't, because they loved the keyboard more than they loved survival. Mike Lazaridis believed, genuinely believed, that the keyboard was superior, and technically, he might have been right for email. But markets don't reward technical correctness. They reward what people want, and people wanted touchscreens. Jim Balsillie believed the enterprise market was a fortress, that IT departments and CIOs would protect BlackBerry forever. He didn't account for employees revolting, for the bottom-up pressure of consumerization, for the cultural shift where work tools had to be as beautiful as personal ones. The BlackBerry story is a mirror. Every company looks at it and sees themselves. Every leader recognizes the trap of believing your competitive advantage is permanent, of thinking customer loyalty transcends product value, of confusing brand strength with market immunity. The smartphone market was worth $150 billion in 2010. Today, in 2026, it's worth over $700 billion annually. BlackBerry could have owned a piece of that. Instead, they're a footnote, a cautionary tale taught in business schools, a brand name that makes people nostalgic for QWERTY keyboards and BBM. And here's the cruelest part. They weren't lazy. They weren't stupid. They worked insanely hard. They believed in their product. They just believed in the wrong product at the wrong time. For too long. So the king died. Not from a lack of effort, not from bad luck, but from a refusal to see the world as it was becoming instead of how it used to be. If this story hit you, if it reminded you that legacy is not a shield and that the market doesn't care about your past, then you need to hear more of these. Subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who's clinging to a sinking ship and calling it loyalty. Because the truth is, most of us are BlackBerry, holding on to something that worked once and refusing to let go. The question is, will you recognize it before it's too late?